June 7th, 1942. 2 days ago, I talked about this week's action in the Central Pacific Ocean, the fighting in the Aleutians, and the beginning of the Battle of Midway. I'm going to pick up now, right where I left off. I'm Indy Neidell. This is an extra regular episode of World War II that focuses on the action this week in the Pacific Ocean. The 4 damaged Japanese carriers of Kido Butai, the 1st Air Fleet, burn well into the afternoon of June 4th, and a couple of them into the night and the morning of the 5th. Although they have suffered devastating damage from bombs and internal explosions, their hulls beneath the waterline remain intact. This means that they don't just sink, but instead become lifeless hulks drifting on the water as the fires slowly burn themselves out. Several Japanese destroyers have been guarding the wrecks the whole time while trying to fish survivors out of the water. There is great fear among Combined Fleet Commander Isoroku Yamamoto's staff that the Americans might capture the hulks and tow them back to Pearl Harbor. Although their military value is pretty much non-existent by now, the fear is that they will be shown off as trophies and exhibited in newsreels and newspapers. That would be unbearable. Fire and smoke rise into the sky from the wrecks like from bonfires, easily drawing the attention of American planes and submarines. But if the Americans won't put an end to them, the Japanese will themselves. Reports of Kido Butai Commander Shuichi Nagumo withdrawing the rest of his ships westward are received by Yamamoto aboard his flagship, the battleship Yamato. His staff officers are furious and quick to accuse Nagumo of cowardice and incompetence, blaming him for the still unfolding catastrophe. Nobutake Kondo, commanding the Midway Occupation Force and Covering Group, is given orders to rally his and the rest of Kido Butai's surface forces, bypassing Nagumo, and form an offensive battle line. With luck, they can engage the American carriers in a surprise attack sometime after midnight. However, the longer they head east that night, the more Yamamoto begins to doubt this new plan. So far, there have been no new reports of enemy contact, and the night is dragging on. Are they heading into another trap? When daylight comes, will they fall victim to further waves of enemy aircraft? Stress, sleeplessness, and overall fatigue take their toll on the commanding officer's judgment. No one wants to acknowledge defeat, but they are in fact running out of options. Landing troops on Midway without air cover is impossible. The idea of bringing the light carriers down from the Aleutians in the hope of launching a surprise attack on the American carriers is nothing more than wishful thinking. At midnight, Yamamoto orders Kondo's force to turn around once more and join up with the main body of the fleet. That order is admitting defeat. By 2:55 a.m., Order 161 goes out. Operation MI is canceled. The main body will fall in with the Midway Invasion Force and the 1st Carrier Striking Force and proceed back to Japan. Japanese destroyers have already moved in on the floating wrecks of Soryu and Kaga on the 4th and torpedoed their hulls in order to sink them. Soryu at 4:10 in the afternoon, Kaga at 7:25 p.m. Akagi is to follow. With eyes full of tears, Yamamoto's officers protest against sinking the Emperor's warship with the Emperor's own torpedoes. But Yamamoto, himself a former skipper aboard Akagi, sees no other alternative. I was once the captain of the Akagi, and it is with heartfelt regret that I must order that she be sunk. I will apologize to the Emperor for the sinking of Akagi by our own torpedoes. The scuttling order reaches Kido Butai at 3:50 a.m. and is at once relayed to the destroyers. As the sun rises at 4:55, and to the cries of Akagi Banzai, the carrier is hit. In short order, Akagi lists and sinks. The 4th Fleet Carrier, Hiryu, is actually able to keep pace with the rest of Kido Butai until around 10 p.m. the 4th, but then her power gives out. Shortly after midnight, another explosion rocks the ship. There is no other choice but to abandon her. The destroyer Makagumo fires 2 torpedoes into her bow, but Hiryu refuses to sink until 9 in the morning of the 5th, when her smoking hulk is finally swallowed by the sea. And with that, the fleet carriers of Carrier Divisions 1 and 2 are no more. But while the Japanese head home from Operation MI, Operation AL against the Aleutian Islands continues as planned. On the 6th and 7th, elements of the Japanese Northern Army land unopposed on Kiska and Attu Islands. This invasion is quite symbolic, as it is a direct invasion of U.S. soil, but its actual strategic value is dubious. Even if the Japanese could build an airbase here to threaten mainland Alaska, supplying and holding on to these far-off islands would be pretty impractical, especially after not taking Midway. The invasion is also unnecessarily brutal. Kiska is defended by only 10 men and a dog from a U.S. weather station. The Japanese kill 2 and take 7 prisoner. The escapee will surrender in a couple of months. Attu village is inhabited by 45 indigenous Aleutians and an elderly white American couple, Mr. and Mrs. Jones. Mr. Jones is murdered, and the Aleutians are taken as prisoners of war and sent to a POW camp on Hokkaido, where they are treated as subhuman and live and work under horrible conditions. Many die of exhaustion, illness, malnutrition, and violence. Those few who survive and return to Attu after the war find the village completely destroyed. There's no home to return to, and to this day, in 2021, Attu remains uninhabited. As for the American Navy, Ray Spruance, commanding Task Force 16, knows very well that he has only a short window of time available if he wants to chase the Japanese fleet. Once his ships enter airstrike range of Japanese-occupied Wake Islands bombers, the tables might very well be turned. And risking carriers Enterprise and Hornet after the loss of Yorktown is out of the question. Well, after receiving definite confirmation that there is no 5th Japanese carrier somewhere out there waiting for them, he orders all flight decks to hunt down whatever stragglers they can find. Throughout the afternoon of the 5th, the remaining SBDs cover hundreds of miles of ocean, but only find Hiryu's sinking spot and the lone destroyer Tanikaze. In lieu of other targets, they descend on her. Astoundingly, Tanikaze is able to somehow dodge all 90 bombs directed at her by a frantic snake dance through the water until the SBDs are forced to follow their homing beacons back to their carriers. On the 6th, Spruance decides to make one final attempt to finish off stragglers. Thanks to Yamamoto's compulsive need for deception over the previous days, the combined fleet is still divided into half a dozen tactical groups that can be hundreds or even thousands of miles apart. Without any air cover of their own, they are easy targets for American aircraft. At 6:45 a.m., planes find the 2 damaged cruisers Mogami and Mikuma. The day before, they had collided with each other while trying to evade the American submarine Tabor, and they're now limping away. The dive bombers take their time, descending into perfect dives. Mogami is hit by 2 500-pound bombs, and the main gun turret collapses in on itself, but it is still able to move. Mikuma is less fortunate and takes at least 5 direct hits, bringing her to a halt. One dive bomber pilot describes her as a huge bathtub full of scrap iron and junk. Mogami abandons her sister ship, which sinks at dusk, taking most of the crew down with her. With the planes running low on fuel, Spruance decides they should not push their luck any further. By nightfall, the force begins its journey back to Oahu. Spruance radios Pacific Fleet Commander Chester Nimitz that they have hit 4 Japanese carriers and left them burning. A communique is posted that appears in nearly all American newspapers. Pearl Harbor has now been partially avenged. Vengeance will not be complete until Japanese sea power is reduced to impotence. While Task Force 16 is busy hunting, Jack Fletcher of Task Force 17 still holds hope that they will be able to save the Yorktown. On the morning of the 5th, a salvage team boards the ship, and a tugboat is summoned to tow her back to Pearl. The carrier is listing heavily towards port, electrical power is out, and oil smears all over make work difficult. But with the help of the destroyer Hammond, they are able to counterflood the ruptured fuel tanks. By midday, all fires are extinguished, and Yorktown is moving again. However, the column of smoke has long since attracted an unseen hunter, the Japanese submarine I-168. Undetected by the destroyers, I-168 slips inside the column after midnight. At 1:36 in the afternoon on the 6th, the submarine is close enough to launch its fish. The first torpedo hits Hammond squarely, while numbers 2 and 3 pass under her keel and detonate against the hull of Yorktown. Hammond's lookouts do spot the incoming torpedo trails in the water, but at this short range, there is no time for countermeasures. Hit amidship, Hammond is cut in half. The depth charges stored in her stern, which are already armed, detonate all at once. Yorktown is hit at frames 84 and 95, rocking the carrier. The explosions throw men off of the carrier, while debris from Hammond flies lethally through the air and oil ignites on the water. I-168 dives for maximum cover, passing under the burning Yorktown. For hours, the sub is pursued by vengeful destroyers, relentlessly depth charging her. But I-168 escapes. At first, it looks like Yorktown will shrug this damage off, since the torpedoes hit her undamaged starboard side. Once more, the salvage teams get to work, counter-flooding the damaged sections. However, once she is back on a somewhat even keel, Yorktown is now too deep in the water to be towed. The carrier must be abandoned. At dawn on the 7th, today, Yorktown begins listing to port, gradually rolling onto her beam ends until the flight deck is almost vertical. Slowly, the bow lifts out of the water as the carrier goes down by the stern. For a few moments, her bow stands straight up out of the ocean before Yorktown is dragged down into the abyss. Also today, Chief of Naval Operations Ernest King gives a press conference in Washington. He says that although it has been a tough battle, the American forces have won a great victory. Their own losses are nothing in comparison to those of the enemy. They have destroyed 4 of Japan's fleet carriers, sank 1 heavy cruiser and damaged another and several destroyers. More than 290 Japanese aircraft have been destroyed, and hundreds of skilled mechanics, pilots, and sailors have been killed. The Americans themselves have lost Yorktown and Hammond, with 145 planes destroyed and over 300 men killed. The Japanese fleet has been beaten, and beaten badly. Of course, while the U.S. Navy is eager to let the American people know of their victory, the opposite is the case in Japan. Yamamoto confines himself to his rooms, looking visibly ill. He knows that ultimately, responsibility rests on his shoulders, for this is his operation from beginning to end. And upon his return to Japan, he will have to answer to the emperor for this catastrophe. In fact, Emperor Hirohito is not told the news until the evening of the 5th, Tokyo time. Upon hearing it, he is stunned into silence. As is expected of him, he then declares his full confidence in the Navy, but makes it clear that the consequences of the disaster must not reach the public. What follows is one of the greatest cover-ups in military history. To conceal the magnitude of the losses, not just the outcome of the battle, but the whole Battle of Midway itself will be withheld from the public. Other than the emperor, top officials, and high admirals, almost no Japanese will know what actually happened at Midway. Now, this might seem impossible with thousands of eyewitnesses, but the military will make sure that not a single word of Kido Butai's destruction reaches the public. Families of the dead are informed over time of their loss, but no ships or locations are mentioned in the messages. They're all treated as individual incidents. The wounded are confined to hospital ships as secret patients and quarantined in isolated wards. No family, no loved ones, no comrades are allowed to see them. Instead, they are treated with humiliation and shame by the supervising medical staff. The uninjured as well are treated from now on as second-class citizens. Officers and enlisted men alike are allowed no calls, no letters, no home leave. Instead, they're almost immediately reassigned as replacements in the South Pacific, from where most of them will never return. The civilian cameraman Teiichi Makishima, who has actually filmed the attacks on Akagi and Kaga, is surveilled by the Kempeitai, Japan's secret police, before he himself is shipped away to an isolated location in the South Seas. Military censorship is not uncommon, But now it goes into overdrive, faking messages in the newspapers and spreading lies to the Japanese public. The secrecy also extends to the Navy. Kaga and Soryu are taken off the ship registry, while Akagi and Hiryu remain listed, but are listed as unmanned before they too are removed from the registry in September. Most records, such as ship logs or battle diaries, will disappear or are destroyed over time. Admiral Nagumo will return to command the carrier force, and Admiral Yamamoto will still retain his aura of invincibility. To Japan, it will seem like nothing has happened. As a result, the Battle of Midway does not enter the Japanese conscience until long after the war. Yes, I realize I'm breaking the timeline. However, the consequences of the battle will soon be revealed. Before Pearl Harbor, Yamamoto predicted that if Pearl Harbor were successful, Japan would have 6 months to run wild. That prediction has come true pretty much to the day. Remember, he and everyone in Japanese high command knows they cannot match the industrial power of the US, and that strike was to give them such an advantage that their new empire would be secure before American industry could create a superior Pacific fleet. Well, now they have the empire, but how secure is it? That is the big question, because the Battle of Midway has dramatically changed the power dynamic in the Pacific theater. Japan has lost its vaunted superiority in naval aviation, and it seems unlikely they will regain it anytime soon. So this is the end of Kido Butai. As for their beginnings, we did a 5-hour, 10-part miniseries, Pearl Harbor Minute by Minute, 6 months ago when Kido Butai made itself known to the world. We did that in collaboration with World of Warships and even used their game engine to recreate some of the battle sequences. The series is super exciting and it's really, really good, and you can check out part 1 right here. If you want to see more special regular episodes like today's, more special episodes, and more everything, then join the Time Ghost Army at patreon.com or timeghost.tv, for that is what finances all of our productions. Do not forget to subscribe, and I will see you in 6 days.